We're ready for our third panel of the day and the fourth and last panel of our conference. It's called Facing the Challenge, an approach towards productive methods and narratives to face extremism and the disintegration of Europe. It's a rather dark title, but we'll try to lighten it up a little bit. Please welcome our moderator, Martin Ehl, distinguished journalist from the Czech Republic. The British-Turkish writer Elif Shafak. And the flamboyant philosopher Slavoj Žižek. And of course, the students.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yes, it's already, yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Martin Ehl from Czech Economic Daily, obviously not Slavoj Žižek, as you might read in materials for the conference. I was very pleased to be moderator of this panel. At the same time, I'm a little bit afraid, and this is my fear, because the conference is about the fear, and my fear is to satisfy all expectations in the room. So I will start with a short introductory round where we start with the students. I will ask them what is they fear right now at this moment, the biggest one. In one sentence answer, and the second sentence will be your introduction, who you are, from where. Start with this from the side, from the right side.
So with me. Yeah, hi, I'm Annalena Sender. I'm from Germany and I study in Krakow in Poland. My fear is a fear. I'm afraid of people who let fear taking over.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Angelica. I'm from Belarus. And my biggest fear is to probably end up the conference without coming up with some kind of a new narratives that would bring us forward.
Good afternoon, my name is Anna, I am from Switzerland, and my biggest fear is that we only think about ourselves and not trying to find solutions together.
Hello, I'm Athanasia from Cyprus. My biggest fear is to call our generation, the young generation, the lost generation of Europe.
Hello, my name is Danishwar Nathaniel. I'm from Indonesia, but I study in Amsterdam, sociology and anthropology. My biggest fear is to not be able to go back to Europe.
Hello everybody, my name is Stefan Ubiparipovic, come from Serbia, and my biggest fear is that this panel comes out without any actual solutions. So, yeah.
Please.
Hi, I'm Itamar, originally from Israel and now living in Germany. My fear is not being able to react to the reality around us.
Hello everyone, my name is Alexander, I'm from Ukraine and I study international private law at KU Leuven. And my biggest fear is that the peace that has been taken for granted in Europe for so long may come to no more in some parts of Europe, and that's scary.
Hello, I'm Pauline Grimer. I'm coming from France. I'm studying political science in a Franco-German program. My biggest fear would be to talk about Europe to my grandchildren as something that doesn't exist anymore.
Hello, beautiful people of Brussels. Actually, my biggest fear is I cannot say it right now because my friends have very concrete, ready fears they can talk about. My fear is like just being nervous to talk to so many people right now here. I think that will be the most factual one. I don't know I have too many other fears, but hopefully we'll be talking about some of them here today. And by the way, my name is Dan Najaf. I'm from Iraqi Kurdistan region. I'm studying at the University of Durham, studying anthropology right now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Lena, I'm from Austria, and I fear that after the presidential elections that we had in Austria last Sunday, that the left-wing candidate won, I fear that the separation of the society is going to deepen and that it is not going to be overcome with the left-wing candidate now.
Hello, my name is Katerina. I'm from Macedonia, from Skopje. My biggest fear is not having anything to fight for anymore.
Thank you very much. We now know a little bit intimate questions about us. Elif, Shafak, you don't want to answer on that. You don't have fears?
No, I have many fears. That's why I don't want to answer, I guess. I don't have one single fear, but I like to listen to, everyone. It was amazing, very powerful. I have many anxieties, many fears. That's why I write novels. I think we writers like to put all of that in our stories.
Mr. Žižek, what's your biggest fear now? Take a microphone, please.
Sorry. Does it work? Yes. Not what everybody's fear, the rise of new fascism and so on. This is only a symptom. What truly went wrong is this liberal democratic project. I call it immediately the Fukuyama left. Like, we can keep the system, just arrange it a little bit. What I am afraid is that this liberal center left didn't learn anything, and it will just go on painting this scare of new fascism and so on. And even if we win for now, as in Austria, in 5-10 years, it will get even worse. Let's cure the disease, not the symptoms. The new right-wing populism, whatever we call it, is a symptom. We have to begin a strong self-critique of our political establishments which failed. My fear is that this will not happen.
Thank you. I have prepared more.
Thank you. I feel like in old communism, the people spontaneously.
You will get more of that, I guess. After watching the last two panels, I have prepared small exercise for all of us. First, it's because of the lunch, and second, there was some criticism from the young generation. I'm afraid I cannot be counted into that. Even we were just joking that I really remember some of communism, but I'm not so old. Now we can vote in this way. Those of you who voted in any of last elections in your country, please stand up. And then if I would be populist, I would say those who sit down could leave the room because it's not about the discussion about democracy. So thank you very much. Well, I prepared about 150 questions for both of you, but I realized that there are more questions around us. But I have for each of you, one question, which somehow derived from the debates we have heard previously. I will start with Elif Shafak. There was yesterday there was one note of one panelist that why should we as Europeans, with the European project a little bit in crisis, to put it mildly. Let's look at the Ottoman Empire as a model of multicultural society because it lasted about 600 years, while Europe as an integration project is in crisis after 60 years. Is it realistic to think, or is Ottoman Empire idea having something to offer something to us?
Thank you. I'm always very suspicious when it comes to over-romanticizing the past, and this is something particularly the nationalists and Islamists in Turkey do a lot. They portray a very golden age. And interestingly, many of the populist movements today use the same rhetoric. They talk about not necessarily focusing on the future, but recovering a lost grandeur that was stolen from them, according to their rhetoric. So we see the same thing in Turkey. We talk about the golden age of the Ottomans. We hear the same thing in Hungary. Interestingly, even in the American campaign, in the Trump campaign, it was always talking about making America great again. And the emphasis is on that again. Something has been lost. So this desire to go to the past, the golden past, is something that I find very dangerous. Of course, we have to have a consciousness, we have to have awareness of history, we have to learn from history, draw lessons from history. Memory is important, memory is a responsibility, but without over-romanticizing the past. The Ottoman Empire that you're talking about, it had its beauties, it has its atrocities. And we should be able to talk about both calmly. The problem in Turkey is people always say, you know, whatever our ancestors did, they did the right thing. They never try to see the same story from multiple angles. I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller, and I always ask, who is telling the story? So the answer to the Ottoman Empire will change, whether it's a Serbian peasant who's telling the story, an Armenian silversmith, or maybe a prostitute in a brothel in Istanbul, or a concubine in a harem, or the Sultan or the Sheikhul Islam, depending on who is telling the story of the Ottoman Empire at a given time, the answer, the interpretation will change completely. Nonetheless, I think Turkey is, of course, a very important country. Turkey has been going through enormous changes, and we should look at the case of Turkey very closely, also because we have been experiencing this dramatic slide into so-called illiberal democracy for quite some time now. So what Hungary is experiencing, what Poland is experiencing, what's going on across Europe in terms of the rise of populism, tribalism, isolationism, and xenophobia, Turkey has been going through this already before. So looking more closely at the Turkish case, I think is very telling, is very important.
There was a very short remark in one of the previous debates about if Islam is a part of Europe. Is it part of European heritage, part of European values?
I mean, with all due respect, I think we have to refrain from phrasing our questions like that because they're not contributing, they are counterproductive. Why are we making such a huge generalization about Islam? I think it's better to talk about Islams, plural, Muslims, plural. I know so many different ways of interpreting the same religion, just like in Christianity, just like in Judaism. All throughout its history, Islam has been interpreted in different ways. There has been orthodoxies, there have been heterodoxies, there have been Sufis, mystics. Many of these people have been persecuted by the orthodoxies. And today, just like before, there's a whole variety of different practices under Islam. It would be a dramatic mistake to think that Muslims are a monolithic whole of people who act in the same way. Certainly, people can be Muslim, composed of multiple selves. We're composed of water. That means we're composed of multiple attachments to different places. And we can have more than one home, we can have more than one homeland, we can be many things at the same time. So Islam is compatible with democracy.
I'm asking because this panel is supposed to frame some kind of narratives for the future, so, and probably...
A totally corrupted opportunist. But I return to my answer to your first question. My crazy hope, and I'm easily convinced that I was wrong, but I'm still not sure that I'm wrong. My crazy hope was that with all the horror that Trump presidency imagines, that it will shake out the democratic liberal establishment and move it to some kind of more radical self-questioning and a little bit to the left. It's possible. That's why I totally supported Bernie Sanders. With all his naiveties, you know what was the miracle of Bernie Sanders? He mobilized precisely those ordinary people, lower middle class, who usually vote for conservative Republicans. But I'm more and so again, Trump is a nightmare. But first, I claim it's nonetheless too easy to dismiss him as fascist. This is so easy also in Europe. Liberal left doesn't want to think. So when they see something that they don't like, and they are right, not liking it, they say, oh, it's fascism. No, things are not so simple, my God. remember 10 years ago when he was killed, Pim Fortuyn, what he was anti-immigrant racist, but he was the paradox of politically correct anti-immigrant racist. Something new is emerging. So again, I will get lost. The answer to your question, Trump is a great danger, but I think that I'm ready to use the devil if it enables us to shake up this democratic establishment. They were responsible. They produced Trump. My friends are telling me when they report me of the United States as if in the United States there was some fascist coup d'etat. No, sorry, Trump was democratically elected. Why? You can even prove it statistically. If only all those voters of Bernie Sanders who stayed at home because they were horrified by how Hillary Clinton crushed Bernie Sanders, if they were to vote, Hillary would have won. This is our ultimate danger. Will we be able to break out of this centrist left liberal establishment? Or we will go on being horrified, oh, fascism is rising, and so on and so on. We should all be together. I agree with in the sense in you meant. But you know, sometimes a path to true unity leads only through a radical division. Remember, so that you will not accuse me of being a communist or what, one of the great moments of French history, General de Gaulle. How did he become the great unifier? In 1940, what he did was crazy. In clear counteract to all democratic rules, he insisted on his own line. Don't ever forget that Marshal Pétain was nominated by the democratically elected parliament and so on. The first rule today for us, it's a difficult lesson, and I just give you the provocation as a then I will go on, is also, if by democracy we mean we should consult the people, no, it's not enough. I always tell this to my friend Varoufakis, who has some ideas, illusions about democracy. If the way we in Europe treated immigrants, if it were to be done in a more democratic way, consulting the people, it would have been much worse for immigrants. Almost in every country they would have been thrown out, I claim. So no, part of courage today is to say, sorry, people can be wrong. This doesn't mean there is another agent like Communist Party, which is always right. But, you know, we have to kill many, many sacred cows.
So does it mean that we have to have a common enemy as the only unifier, in a sense, and then we project this common enemy into the Trump or into the Le Pen?
No, precisely this I want to... You know where this logic brings you? This is, for me, much worse than Trump in America. The news, and I hope we will agree here, which really makes me sad. Look at how things look to stay now to be in France. It looks that the second round presidential election will be between Marine Le Pen and François Fillon. Sorry, I'm almost tempted to say that I'm more afraid of Fillon. Why? Because the tragedy, and I'm horrified of her, of Marine Le Pen, is that she is the only one who, of course, in this convoluted proto-fascist way, but nonetheless, speaks for the workers' interests. While what Fillon is proposing is radical neoliberal politics combined with social conservatism. And this is the new form of capitalism. This is Putin, this is Erdogan, and so on and so on. That's the danger. So how would you vote in France today? I don't know. Probably I would abstain. But isn't this sad? Where did this, I agree with you, logic of one enemy, Trump, and we are all fascinated and so on? No, even if this sounds Stalinist, you know, Stalin said once, in socialism, the agent of change is self-criticism. But we, liberal West European left, whatever we are, we need a good amount of self-criticism. Don't be fascinated by Trump out there. Ask the key question, how was Trump possible? What mistakes in our politics did make Trump possible? So no, I totally agree with you. That was my big approach to Hillary Clinton. Listen, whom did Hillary represent? From Wall Street to Occupy Wall Street. Did you notice this? From Saudi Arabian money till transgender people and so on and so on. It was this all-inclusive field, and in such a case, you always have to ask one question. Okay, everybody is in, but who is out? He made it clear. The movement mobilized by Bernie Sanders was out. That's why she lost.
Thank you. So we have already a question there.
Actually, it's not a question, and I hope it's not modest to say that I agree with you. What's going on in Europe, it's going on for the first time in history. Look, I'm coming from a place where we deal with totalitarianism, with authoritarianism, as you had in Austria. If you had the right ways of doing things, fascism, Trumpism is not inevitable. It's something you can solve, it's something you can stop. So I agree with that point. So, thanks.
I hope we will not stay with the definitions of these words. We somehow understand what we are talking about. Please.
Yes, just to follow up, I mean, thank you. Yes, I also come from a land, similar geographies. Indeed, we are more familiar to forms of authoritarianism. But something new is also taking place. Governments that use the means of democracy, that come to power through democracy, and then use their power to smother democracy. And this is where we are left a little bit speechless as the liberal left. And I agree, we need to be more self-critical, but that doesn't mean we need to support, other extremists, because dualities, I think extremism always creates more extremism. So far right creates its own version of far left, and that creates its own version of far right. We need to break those vicious circles. And there are better ways of doing that, I believe. So the problem today is, it's not only that we have Trump over there, Erdogan here, Putin over there, but first and foremost, we are very much interconnected. We are far too globalized not to notice the similarities. There are lots of similar patterns in addition to differences. They keep affecting each other. In general, as liberal left, I think we have done a very poor job in terms of connecting with people's emotions. We usually treat human beings as rational creatures, and we come to the table with facts and logic and knowledge. There's no way we can bring down populist demagogues with facts. I'm not by any means saying that facts are not important. I am by no means saying that knowledge is not important. Of course, these matter enormously, but we should also talk about emotions and understand that as human beings, we're emotional creatures. So we need to put more emotional intelligence on the table. This is the age of anxiety. From anxiety to anger, from anger to aggressiveness, there are very short steps. It could easily become the age of aggressiveness. So I think we need to get out of our own little cocoons, out of our own cultural ghettos, our own echo chambers, connect with people's anxieties. This is something we writers do well because we are very emotional too. And understand that there's nothing wrong about being anxious. People have fears and anxieties about the future of their children, that they're worried that their children might not have the equal job opportunities. They're worried about refugees, they're worried about immigrants, they're worried about the other. All these things are understandable. What is not okay is to let fear guide. Nations have made the worst mistakes in their history when they were guided by fear. So that's where we need to change our rhetoric, our approach, and we can do this with a much more humanistic, new, fresh approach.
Would the solution be more artists in the politics?
I really think artists need to speak up more, which is not an easy challenge for us because we are introverted creatures. As writers, we live in our own solitary world. But our job is empathy, and empathy is something you learn. It's like a muscle. The more you do it, the better you become at it. Empathy means trying to see the same story through a different angle. And yes, I think storytellers need to come up more to the table and start talking about politics. If I may add this, writers from Turkey, Nigeria, Egypt, Pakistan, if you come from non-democracies, wobbly lands, you never have the luxury of being apolitical. So a Turkish writer can never be an apolitical. But I believe European writers are also going to feel the same urgency to respond to social and political events. More and more, they're also going to become more politicized.
We remember a little bit about that from the communist times. Mr. Žižek.
I will really, please, you need to be my dominant now and cut me short. Because while I fundamentally deeply agree with you, I would nonetheless like to make 3 brief remarks. First, yes, of course, against our cocooned existence in narrow circles, but I wonder if you had the same experience, me jumping like crazy all around the world. I noticed that precisely the multicultural elite is, although it pretends and it is universal, you feel at home in a debate in LA, there, if anyone, they live totally in a world of their own. They are maybe the greatest isolated circle today, this multicultural elite. Second point, when you spoke about facts, I totally agree with you. I just would say, but wait a minute, do you think that those expert economists today, here in Brussels and around, they are dreamers? Read Varoufakis, he shows convincingly that today's economy, which got us with all the austerity rhetoric and so on, in what we are, they are not scientists. It's a version of astrology. They are making again and again, don't give those who proclaim today to be experts, don't give them the dignity of acting like objective scientists, experts. Their ideology at its purest. They are the true poets who are telling us tales. Third thing, we would have to debate this because, you know, my sad experience, maybe we are different without any irony or patronizing. I think that you, Turkey, I was often there from my experience, you are much more civilized, developed than, for example, my part of the world, ex-Yugoslavia. There, I would say, anything corrupt people, just not poets into politics, they are the worst. It's not a chance that, you know, the guy who is now sitting in jail 200 miles north from here, Radovan Karadzic, from Bosnia, a poet. I claim, I can prove it to you empirically. Behind every ethnic cleansing, there is a poet. And it has to be, because we are usually relatively decent people. If somebody were to tell me I should, I'm sorry, but I do this on provocation, I should rape you and kill you, I would have some problems with it. So what do I need? A strong metaphysical, religious, poetic vision which totally changes this horrible act that they want me to do into the highest sacrifice for homeland and so on and so on. So I would say yes, great poets, and they are the greatest we have. But poets can also be, my God, a source of horror. At least that's the experience in my country. It's not only Bosnians, Serbs in Bosnia. All other ex-Yugoslav republics had their own Karadzicis, and so on and so on.
Yeah, I think
I wanted to provoke you.
No, and you managed, yes, indeed. I never said that poets were, you know, heroes, and I don't like to over-romanticize ages or people, and I don't do that. But I come from a land, you know, that has now become the biggest jailer of journalists, surpassing even China. There are more than 140 journalists in Turkey's prisons today. There are intellectuals, editors, cartoonists, linguists, writers, you know, all of them have been imprisoned just because of their views of something they said critical. So certainly poets and writers, I'm not saying that we are wonderful people, but it's very difficult to be a writer. It's difficult to be, of course, a journalist, even much more difficult. Also, coming from Turkey, maybe I use the word multiculturalism as a burden. Diversity is a treasure.
Well, so no economists. We are looking for that future narrative. So no economists, because it's astrology. No poets, because they are killing. I remember one Andrew Karadzic's poems from the 60s, and it's really, you can read the Srebrenica massacre in between the lines there. I confirm that. Yeah. So then whom? Young generation. Where are the leaders? Who will lead us from that shit, as somebody was speaking about it in the beginning of today? Yes? Brave one.
We were talking a bit about international politics when we were discussing the elections in US and who won. And I was talking that my fear is absence of peace, and coming from Ukraine, this is actually what happened in Ukraine. I was Ukraine was living peacefully, and suddenly nobody could expect it. Suddenly there was no more peace. And as you know, probably Ukraine stood up for European values in 2014, and for the values we stood up for, we're now being bullied by our very strong neighbor, Russian Federation. And when we stood up for European values, we saw in the EU a strong partner, diplomatic partner that could support us and help us out in our future. In the development of our country, because still there is a lot to be done in Ukraine. After 3 years after the revolution, and since the conflict in Donbass is unraveling, people just start in Ukraine, like my relatives in my city, people start losing hope in the EU. They start seeing the EU as a weak diplomatic actor that is tied a lot by the financial and economic interests of individual member states, of Germany, of France, for instance, who see a very strong economic partner, a gas supplier in Russia, in person of Russia. And this actually ties the hands of the, that's what in my city and my friends and a lot of Ukrainians actually think, that these economic ties, they don't let the EU to maybe act more freely in terms of diplomacy, and diplomacy in that way we can say is failing. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that diplomacy is failing? And is it actually more a diplomatic crisis which leads to this refugee crisis and migrant crisis? And another question, sorry, too much questions. Another question, I was thinking about, like, the topic, the theme of this conversation is what can be done to resolve this. European Union was created as a proactive, let's say, proactive union that could proactively maintain peace in Europe. And do you think that in order to proactively maintain peace, it would be better to through external action to maintain it in the areas where the conflicts originate from? For instance, like establish external action missions, diplomatic missions in Ukraine. There was one mission, UBAM, I worked in, a mission on border assistance to Moldova because of Transnistrian conflict. Do you think that this would help? This would help to resolve the crisis which follows up from the conflicts surrounding Europe now, and the conflicts at the doorsteps of the Europe?
Similar question around Turkey. Is diplomacy working?
Thank you so much. You know, I'm based in the UK for several years now, and it was very interesting to be Turkish at the time of referendum, before and during the referendum in Britain. I never forget one day, as I was in a car just driving along, there was a big sign in capital letters, "The Turks are coming!" exclamation marks, and underneath it said 80 million of them are coming. Turkey is about to join the EU, so we better leave now. And of course, you see how fear is being, incited, created in country after country. For many of my British and French friends, EU is mostly about finance. They see it as a financial burden, economy. But coming from the periphery of Europe, for me, EU is mostly about values. Yeah? And when I talk about EU, I always remember the journey, how the journey began. Why was there a need for EU or a supranational entity in the first place? And I think we forget the beginning of that journey very easily. That is why memory is so important. This desire to go beyond nation states, beyond nationalism, this desire to stop another possible rise of militaristic nationalism. That was how things began. And that core is today as important as ever before. And also for me, when I say EU values, to me, that's about pluralism, democracy, you know, women's rights, LGBT rights. It's definitely about rule of law, separation of powers. This is how I see Europe. And in that regard, I never want Turkey to walk away from Europe. So it just makes me very scared, to be honest, or worried when I hear Turkey's ruling elite saying, you know what, it doesn't work anymore, now we should walk towards Russia, towards Pakistan, now we should talk about Shanghai Five. All members of Shanghai Five are completely non-democratic. So there are new, you know, attempts to create alternative blocks elsewhere. People are losing their faith in democracy, liberal democracy, but also Europe as an ideal. And I think this is something that should concern all of us. Overall, I am worried that we live with an illusion, the illusion that sameness will bring safety. This is just an illusion. There is no such thing. But this is what they're selling us. And I know, I can hear your disappointment coming from Ukraine. I share similar disappointments. We feel, especially people who are liberals, Democrats, leftists from such difficult territories, I think we feel very much forsaken or abandoned. And we have to remind Europe of our importance as well.
Again, cut me short. I'm afraid of talking too much. You know, I also, like the lady, I understand your disappointment of Ukraine and so on and so on. But although, again, I'm very much against Putin regime, I don't know if it was published in Turkey, when I was attacked there by some Erdogan people, I even proposed a formula for a new leader emerging. I did a kind of a Freudian Verdichtung, condensation of Putin and Erdogan. I proposed the term Putogan, because they are very similar. That's for me the paradox, you know. Kind of a wild democracy. Okay, so, but what I'm saying is nonetheless, you know, I'm still obsessed with self-criticism. I don't know how it goes in Ukraine, but I was pro-Ukraine, although in my very vicious way. For example, when I noticed after Maidan Square demonstrations, statues of Lenin being torn down, I agree with it, because obviously Lenin was the symbol of Soviet Union there. But nonetheless, it's interesting to note, and I didn't read this in any communist propaganda, but in neutral historical books, that wasn't, in the modern sense, Ukrainian nationality constructed in the 20s, in the early Bolshevik years. In Russia, in Tsarist Russia, you were not allowed to have your own literary language and so on and so on.
We were not allowed, but we had it.
You had it, yes, but in the 20s you were allowed. Sorry,
it was
this is not
just a short period before they were beaten by Bolsheviks.
No, this was, sorry, even there, now we come to real conflicts. I know the story there, you say beaten by Bolsheviks. Who was beaten by whom? Of course, I'm horrified at that Bolshevik act of trying to occupy Poland. But what were the Poles doing? What happened a year ago? Poland tried to take all of Ukraine and so on. They occupied Kharkov. Nobody was clean there. So don't present it as if poor Poland, oh, evil Bolsheviks attack. The least you can say about Lenin, I know his political horrors and so on, is that he took national sovereignty very seriously. He gave, okay, but let's not get lost in this. What I wanted to say is more important thing. When you say European values, but we have to be very precise here. What do we mean by European values? Which European values? When you say democracy, I see a serious limitation of democracy, and this is not some Marxist trick. My God, intelligent conservatives know this. I claim, to provoke you, democracy really works only in the states where you have some kind of a basic cultural, ideological homogeneity of a population. I'm not saying the only choice is dictatorship. I'm saying already you see the problems in Canada. When you have, and they are still culturally the same, French and English there, but the moment you have radical cultural, ethnic differences, democracy has to be supplemented by some kind of negotiation or whatever. It doesn't work all the way. Then, when you said we stood for European values, where for me, although I was lynched by many leftists for being allegedly Islamophobic, which I am not, but I'm claiming, okay, it's a provocation, not to you as more to some others. Okay, we have now a test of European values. How do you stand against refugees? For me, the moment you say, no, refugees are from outside, different culture, we never... For me, this is not just racism. This is against the fundamental European values. That's why I claim, if by European values we mean what is really worth fighting for in European legacy, then, in spite of all hordes of Muslims coming and so on, I'm consciously, ironically using racist terms, the greatest threat to Europe is our own anti-immigrant right, our own defenders of Europe. If we have Europe ruled by Le Pen, Farage, that's the end of Europe. So you see, that's the problem of Europe. I wrote even a short book called Was will Europa? What does the Europe want? Ironic reference to Freud's What Does a Woman Want? I don't see any singular, simple core of European values. Europe is torn at least between three models. The conservative culturalist, whatever you call them, anti-immigrant Europeans. Then we get this, what your great city is usually Brussels, identify with this European, let's call it neutral technocracy, what Brussels stands today, and maybe a little bit of the original welfare state dream, where you don't just have freedom, blah, 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 but this freedom includes economic justice. I claim if Europe will not make a step in that direction, then let it drop that. I don't care.
Short note on refugees, then we have a question from the students.
Yeah, no, with regards to the refugee question, I think as we all know, it's now the biggest humanitarian crisis since the Second World War, but we have for a very long time treated the refugee crisis as if it were a regional problem, as if it was happening somewhere else, elsewhere, far away. And I think that approach created big problems in the long run. What EU bureaucracy, and of course we cannot generalize it to everyone, Europe means multiplicity of opinions, but EU bureaucracy made big mistakes in terms of outsourcing the refugee problem. Where? To Turkey, to Lebanon, yeah, to Jordan, 3 countries. And if you look at the interviews or the statements in Jordan, in Lebanon, again and again, many policymakers have said, look, what's happening is not sustainable, it's going to collapse. Because when you look at the population of Jordan, when you look at the amount, the number of refugees that Lebanon has accepted, and also in Turkey, where we have 3 million refugees. And then, of course, it became a political card between the AKP, Turkey's AKP, Erdogan, and Europe. Again, for a long time, EU bureaucracy did not say anything about freedom of speech violations or human rights violations in Turkey because of the refugee deal. This created another resentment among Turkey's Democrats. Another thing we never talk about, it never makes the headlines, is the gender disproportion. I think it is an important part of the problem. Many of the refugees, because of the difficulty of the journey, because of the perils along the way, who could make it to Europe, happen to be men. You know, young men between a certain age, many of them unmarried. And we have seen the consequences of these cultural clashes, more gender clashes. Again, this is something we never talk about because either we think it's not politically correct or we think it's not relevant, but it is important. I do not understand why more refugee women or more refugee sexual minorities have not been supported by Europe, and the importance of gender has not been noticed earlier. Again, in Turkey, because of the situation right now, we have a huge increase in the number of child brides. We have a huge increase in polygamy. You know, these are things that really are not covered by papers. But even though polygamy is illegal, there are many Turkish men who are marrying girls, Syrian girls, and I'm saying girls deliberately because their ages are so low, as their second wives or third wives, and many families think they will be safer in this way, so these girls are being married off. So there are many, many human stories, tragic stories that are going on that we might not see at first glance. We can only solve this together as international, as world citizens, as global souls. So today we need that supranational communication more than ever before. This was the only way to approach the refugee problem, not by trying to outsource it to non-democratic countries.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify and ask an add-up question to my last one about international politics. So in the end, and I also wanted to recall the saying of our last presenter from the second conversation, from a refugee from Syria living in Germany. He said that he has never dreamed of being a refugee, and when I've heard that, I felt like all refugees, in the end, they hope for peace settling in their country, and at some point of their lives, they hope to return back to their country because they left their families, they left their friends, they left their houses there. So they still, and I have a lot of friends from Ukraine who are now refugees in Poland, and they still want to return to Donbass. They hope that there will be peace settled. So do you think the EU actually does enough and is involved enough in settling peace in the points of conflict?
I totally agree here with you, and to make it very clear, the problem I see is even more radical. What I don't like is that we perceive the problem of refugees as a humanitarian one, in the sense of horrible things are happening there, we should open ourselves and so on. I think we should have to first, the only way to, I mean, the solution of the problem is not Europe should totally open itself and receive 30, 40 million of refugees. The solution is to, although it sounds pathetic and abstract, to attack the causes. The first thing to do as Western European, but even more as Russian American, is to ask, where does this wave of refugees come from? If Europe were not to intervene in Libya, if United States were not to attack Iraq, Syria, if there were not to be a Syrian war, which is a pure proxy war. Let's be serious. Syrian war is not, from what I can judge, a Syrian stuff. Syria is a stage for other big states to fight geopolitical struggles there and so on. That's where we have to attack the problem. I mean, I cannot imagine a greater non-reflected stupidity than the Americans occupying Iraq. Whatever you say against Saddam, and I'm totally against Saddam, but at least, isn't this the tragedy? Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I know, Syria and Iraq were the only two Middle East Arab states which were formally secular. And this even meant something. Like, you remember Tariq Aziz, Saddam's Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was a Christian and so on. So the actual result of American occupation of Iraq is that because the state structure disintegrated, Shia militias took over, 3/4 around, I think, of Christians left Iraq. So what 2,000 years of Islam terror was not able to accomplish, the American intervention did accomplish, to get the country rid of Christians. Second thing, I totally agree with what you said, but just this broader approach. Then there is economic neocolonialism. My God, are we Europeans aware, and others, what we are creating? I always mention this name in Africa. Take a country like Congo, which is a non-existing state. Local warlords controlling territories, but as such, it's perfectly included into the global world market. All these warlords making deal with foreign companies and so on and so on. So we should attack problems at this level on a second point. But we should also ask another uncanny, now this will sound problematic to some of your questions, like I deeply agree with you, this is totally unfair, it's ridiculous. Like the poor Middle East countries are taking the heaviest weight of the refugees. Okay, but then let me ask a simple question. And I'm asking them, and sorry, I didn't get not even a minimum of an answer. But there is quite a series of very wealthy Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Emirates, Qatar. You know how many refugees they are taking? None. They are not taking refugees. You know what was the official Saudi Arabian answer to this? They said, because of cultural balance, we are not taking refugees, but we try to help them so that for every 10,000 refugees in Europe, we build a new mosque there and so on. I mean, and now I'm not blaming some primitive Arab fundamentalism. Saudi Arabia is the most modern country. It's a mafia family organized as a country. Saudi Arabia is a key chapter in modern mafia family. No? What I'm just saying is that, but we in the West are guilty of it. We cannot say Saudi Arabia a primitive country. Saudi Arabia is totally involved with the United States. You know that Saudi Arabia is investing money in the United States? According to some statistics, 8 to 9% of all American, put it property, is owned already by Saudi Arabia. All I'm saying is that we should address this problem and not just this sentimental game, which I agree totally with you, was done in a scandalous way, like allowing refugees to go through Balkan in this wild way. This provoked racism. I'm sorry.
No, we are again in the phase of deconstruction, while this panel is supposed to be like construction, attempt to construct something.
But
so
first you have to ruin to clear the space.
We are already cleaning the space for the last 24 hours here. Clean it enough, okay. Yes.
Excuse me, I know my friends are waiting to ask questions, and this is my second time, so sorry. But I have to disagree very strongly on one point with you. I'm coming from, yes, I'm coming from Halabja.
It's the second time, you know.
Right. No, this is still, I agreed. I'm coming from Halabja, and I think, right, and Elif would know what I'm going to say. Saddam Hussein, that you just said, his removal served chaos in the region. I think.
But not in your part. Your part is a miracle, Kurdistan.
No. Just let me finish my point. Sir, so Saddam Hussein in 16th of March in 1988 attacked Halabja, which is my hometown. I was not born there, but it's my hometown. My father, my family, everyone's coming from there. He attacked Halabja. He killed 5,000 people in 2 hours. He killed 182,000 Kurds in 8 years. He attacked the Shiites in the south, and he killed thousands and hundreds of thousands of them. This is Saddam Hussein. So you might have been, sitting here in Europe in peace, in harmony, but Saddam Hussein was doing all these atrocities. And actually, if Bashar al-Assad, had been prevented in the first year of the revolution, where people were going out in peaceful demonstrations, asking for peace, for democracy, for pluralism, singing, clapping, and Assad had not been allowed by the Western powers to remain there and just kill disproportionately the peaceful protesters, you would not have ISIS. Look, I'm not justifying ISIS, but ISIS was an answer, a Sunni extremist answer to all the atrocities that Assad did, which now turned, of course, into a disease that has caught Europe and the world. And by the way, refugees are not that simply, just let me finish that point. Refugees are not that simply a product of internal problems. Elif Shafak is a Turk. She's from Turkey, and I'm a Kurd. And you know that when the British and the French divided the Middle East, brought a map and said, let's divide this place. Okay? They brought a pen and divided Kurdistan, which was a land, 40 million people, on Turkey, Syria, Iran, and Iraq. And since then, we have been having problems, fights, killings, atrocities. And of course, who's paying now? The streets of Brussels, the streets of Berlin and Paris and the capitals of Europe. They are paying the price right now. Why? Because the PKK supporters and the AKP supporters, the Turkish supporters, are always on the cities, on the streets, fighting each other. Why? Because you imported the problem of Kurdish, Turkish, Sunni, Shiite problems, but they are not internal. Because in a way, Europe created it. Europe went there, created the problem. Now you have these refugees from there coming here and exporting their problems to Europe. What the sense of you saying is like, there is a different land out there, imaginary land, and here is Europe, and these people are coming from there, exporting their problems to us. It's not totally like that. It's totally a different picture.
don't agree with you here. I was beginning to saying precisely this, how Europe created the problems there. And I totally agree. Only one thing I would have added, when you said Saddam bombed Kurds. I totally agree. I would just have added with even more than silent tolerance from United States. They even secretly supplied the poisonous gases to Saddam discreetly there. So I totally agree. I totally agree with you here. Maybe one tiny problem is nonetheless this one. It's more complex because, as you know, Al-Qaeda and so on, this is Sunnis fighting Shias and so on. It's more complex, but nonetheless, one point I would have said, nonetheless, but you, by you, I don't mean you, I mean people from that region, but you are nonetheless not simply passive victims. I don't accept this leftist view that, oh, we Europeans, I call this the inverted white man's burden. You know, 100 years ago, we were the good colonizers. It was our burden to rule you. Now we like to be responsible for everything. There is a horror in Rwanda. Oh, it must not to disagree with you, but to provoke you again. You know that I'm here desperate. Even the most authentic mystical experience.
About poetry first. I would say economists are poets, but there are bigger poets than economists. Think of financial world, like the IMF. I think this is...
I know, they deserve not Bob Dylan Nobel Prize.
Yes, one thing. Next one, about mystification. Oh, this is the same question. Then what we do about that and what we do about the welfare state and welfare state dream and about economic justice. And here we could also look at those who accept refugees. Those people here in the West, the countries that accept refugees and take refugees, but then in Belarus we also do have refugees, unfortunately from the Ukraine. And this is also the experience and something that would unite the EU and the countries outside of the EU, but next to it. And then the question, who would be those people who would construct the new theory of economy, political economy, or who would be the politicians who would be able to unite those things that can be united? Are those economists? And if they are, what do they read? I know one very interesting personality who has died, but who actually wrote a lot that already united the peoples. He is Karl Marx. Is this the person to read and think of? Someone who would be the new foundation for the East and for the West? That's an open question. I don't know. Is historical materialism an option for us for future?
I'm afraid we already tried.
Yes, but I stopped. Yes.
Thank you. I mean, maybe to start from the last question, it's so ironic, isn't it? I mean, we live in the age of information, and I think one of the things we forgot to say is, I don't know. You know, when was the last time any one of us used the sentence, I don't know? Because we know a little bit about everything and anything, and if we don't know, we can just Google it, and we have the necessary information in a split second. But what that does to us is we start to confuse information with knowledge, and then knowledge with wisdom. I think these things are completely different. We have a lot of information, but less knowledge and very little wisdom. Wisdom also requires emotional intelligence. You know, all of them need to be together. One of the problems we're facing is we are, of course, far too globalized. We thought decades ago there was such optimism that with the effects of globalization we would all become a big global village. There would be no more national boundaries. Thanks to the circulation of capital and technology, everybody would be so integrated that nationalism was going to disappear, religion was going to disappear. None of that happened. In some parts, you know, we did become, of course, more interconnected, but today we are facing a huge rise in nationalism, religiosity, populism. Everything that we thought we had left behind is now coming back. My worry is when we try to deal with so much complexity, we have experts who focus only in one area. So you have financial experts who mostly read on finance. We have political experts who only read on their own particular terrains. But we have very little public intellectuals who try to bring together different disciplines, you know, different forms of knowledge, and also emphasize wisdom. in my opinion, it's not a coincidence that it's blocking views that do not necessarily agree with you. I don't like cultural boycotts. I don't like safe spaces. We need to hear people who do not necessarily agree with us.
You mentioned this need for safe spaces. I'd like to connect that to the very feeling of angst. We haven't really talked about, angst and what it, like how it functions. And I'd like to, I don't know, use this conference as an occasion also to reflect on ourselves, a bit more self-critical. Like, let's not just be entertained by awesome speakers on the stage, but also use this occasion to ask ourselves, what is angst? What does it mean to us? And how do we deal with it? Because I think it's a very personal decision, how we deal with it. And it's just up to us to decide if our life, our professional, our personal life is driven by angst or not. So this very title of the conference, European Angst, sometimes I wonder if we are just othering again another group who is very anxious. Because I think it's a deeply human feeling, everybody of us is anxious. So we should also be self-critical, asking ourselves how it works within us. And just maybe use this minute because, for example, are we looking for a comfort zone? Are we looking for our close friends, for our family members, people who share our opinions? Or what are we doing? Because I think the only way to come out of angst is to be brave. It doesn't help just to have a trustworthy, comfortable environment, but we need to be brave. That's the only way, and we have to be constantly brave. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have to face. Everybody has to be brave. So when we have these discussions, I feel that there are very good points, and it's interesting and smart. But sometimes I miss the inspiration to be brave and other people who encourage me to be brave as well. And for me, for my life so far, the EU was a project where I thought it would be worth it to be brave for. Every time there are challenges we are facing, we should, it's nicer to be brave together, right? But in a smart way. Not in an ignorant or naive way, but in a caring way, in a proactive way, in a self-critical way. So certainly, I am not looking for a leader where I say, well, he might be a good solution for me, so I just let him take care of it. But to find new ways to be brave together in order to fight the angst, and not just to exclude a group of our population who is very anxious, apparently, but we are not, obviously.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to ask the question to the panelists really concrete. So what would you do in order to build on your question? What would you concretely do, like minimum 2 suggestions in order to fight populism and extremism, which is leading to radical actions in Europe? And in order to be fair, I have to give my opinion very shortly. I think one of the problems may be the education, but not the only higher level education, but as well as primary and secondary education, which is a lot influenced. And it lacks some certain aspects, which is getting to know children with intercultural dialogue and intercultural learning, because this is one of the things that can lead later to not understanding other cultures. And the second thing I would say here, never forget that there are countries which dream of some standards in Europe, meaning here on enlargement countries as well as the Balkans, as well as the neighborhood countries and further on. And the third point would be that how to think about the economic crisis, because it is also hardly influencing on extremism and so on. The lack of money, job opportunities for young people, and as well combined with not good edifice of quality education, especially in primary and secondary schools. So this is, I think, something that is really important, and we should think about that. Yeah.
Another one?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Can I just follow up on his question? Because he asked my question, like, how do we tackle populism? Now, we have the populists. It is a state of fact. Right now, we have them. They're gaining more and more popularity. They're even getting into power. Now, what do we do to tackle them? And I would just build up on his question, like, do we still, I would offer like 3 options, maybe, like more on practical level. One option, like, should we completely cite them? Demarcate them? Leave them on site? Should we, number 2, let's say, accept some of their ideas? Make them feel that their ideas have been heard? Because they are gaining more and more popularity with selling their ideas. And number 3, should we even collaborate with them closely so that there is some kind of level of platform for making compromise, so they do not get to sell their extremist ideas by their own? And my general question, like the big one, like how do we overcome this European angst that it's like being sold to us by the populists now here in Europe?
Thank you for that, because we are approaching the last quarter of our debate and we are supposed to produce some food for thought, at least, if not the master plan for the future of Europe. So please.
Again, I'm sorry if I will be too long, but I will really try to be short. First, when you said these last questions, like practical advices, what to do, how to fight populism and so on, you see, I seem to be saying all the time the same thing, but I have the impression nobody wants to hear it. How do we fight populism? I repeat it, I think, for the 4th time. By looking into ourselves what we were doing wrong. You are all the time here doing what I was afraid of. Again, how do we fight populism so that we change? Populism is our result. Populism is our symptom. And what you are doing is you are offering what in medicine they call symptomal healing. You know, like you have a serious disease, but if you take certain pills, you don't feel the pain. No, we should tackle the causes of populism. The causes of populism is the economic and ideological fiasco of the central liberal bloc. That's absolutely clear. People are enraged against it. So it's not them, how to deal with them, accept them partially or not. It's how we should change so that our own activity will not give birth to populism. Second thing, when you said learning, now I want really to provoke you. The first thing we have to learn is very problematic, I warn you, is to learn to ignore the others politely. I'm sick and tired of this liberal pressure. There are others, we should understand them, open ourselves. No, I think that true anti-racism for me is not, I understand you. How can I understand you when I don't understand myself and you don't understand yourself? For me, a true multicultural, in the good sense, society is, I live together with Arabs, Jews, blacks, Latinos, and we politely ignore each other. I accept you in your imperfection. You know, it's easy to love your neighbor when you understand him. Oh my God, you see all those wonderful stories. But what if you discover that they are not so nice? As if we also are for them not nice. The single most stupid statement that I remember, for this in my Stalinist state you would be shot immediately, is to say there are no enemies because enemy is only someone whose story we were not ready to listen to. Sorry? Good to learn. So Hitler was our enemy because we were not open enough to listen to. No, there are real enemies. And the more you study them, the more closer you understand them, the more you learn that they are enemies. So again, my point would be at some point codified distance, a polite distance, because this will be forever probably the situation of most of us. You live with other cultures, you don't understand them. Learn to tolerate them as such. Just quickly so that I go. This was a very nice question. I think, I'm sorry, my confusion, that you raised it to say, I don't know. I say it proudly, I don't know. I cannot give you a list of what is it to do serious one. I only know this. A, capitalism is in a crisis at the level of refugees, ecology, intellectual property. It's approaching a deadlock. And let's face it, the left doesn't really have an answer of an alternate economic system. We don't have the answer yet. The first honest step for me is to admit it. I don't think we have an answer here. So then global capitalism. For me, the paradox of global capitalism is precisely that it's global capitalism which perfectly, and this is what we, in a racist way, it's not a good term, call capitalism with Asian values. This danger of perfect integration into the world market, but ideologically supplemented by strong, even pseudo-archaic nationalism, and so on and so on. The last thing, I like very much what you said about that we should learn to read anti-intellectualism and so on and so on. But would you agree, now comes the problematic part, that this goes also for the liberal left? What is now going on, for example, in the United States under political correctness? Sorry, it's an authentic left-wing anti-intellectualism, with using even dirty words and so on. I will give you an example here. Yesterday, wasn't he here? Maybe not here, but in another room. Didier Eribon. He was here. You know how he called me? Check it up, Google it. He called me repeatedly in the last month, a couple of times, that me, Slavoj Žižek, that I'm a fascistoid, feuilleton, clown, and so on and so on. The left is also regressing. Don't you think that just the populists are becoming vulgar? And just the last 2 points, they will interest you. First, all the cries that I hear, young generations. Listen, maybe, I hope so. But I certainly don't believe this totally stupid rhetoric that if young people come here, they will have some great wisdom. No, sorry. Sometimes younger generations are more stupid than previous one, and sometimes not. Youth doesn't guarantee anything. The last point, angst, fear, a beautiful one. I think with a little bit reference to psychoanalysis, we can provide a good formula. That's why I like the term European Angst, because fear is outside. Muslims, whatever you have, nonsense horror. Angst is existential about yourself. What if I don't have it? We have European fear when we fear the others. We have angst when we are deeply aware that, but is what we are defending as European legacy worth defending? What if there is some problem? This is angst. Angst is about yourself. Angst is not external enemies. So yes, the first step towards what is to do is to pass from fear to angst. Yeah, I stopped. Surprise, I stopped.
I want to start with a small example. Actually, it's a small example with major repercussions, the burkini ban. As we all know, there was a horrible, horrible atrocity in Nice, in France, right? So many people have been brutally killed by a fanatic truck driver. And then afterwards we have seen the rise of a certain kind of Islamophobia, which the potential was always there. And we have ended with the burkini ban today in several parts of Europe. And this will continue. It's a continuing debate. But perhaps not many people have not realized that if you remember the picture on the beach with one woman wearing a burkini and the French policeman surrounding her, that picture was taken out of context and circulated all across the Middle East with Arabic, Persian, Turkish captions that said, "You see what they're doing to our women." The reason why I give this example is because anything that creates more of an us versus them division is bound to create more extremism elsewhere. So Islamophobia in one part of the world will create more anti-Western sentiments elsewhere, and more anti-Western sentiments in the Middle East will create more Islamophobia here. How do we go forward? How do we move forward? I really sincerely believe that we have to break this vicious circle. It is like a physical law. The mystics used to talk about this for centuries. The harder you push something, the harder it comes and hits you back. The more you otherize it, the more harshly you approach it, the more harshly it kicks you back in the face. We have to get out of this rhetoric and create new rhetorics. And I agree, we can be self-critical, but at the same time, we can be critical of populism. That doesn't mean that everyone who voted for Brexit is a racist. It doesn't mean that everyone who voted for Trump is a racist. We do have to understand people's anxieties, respect them, understand where they're stemming from, and offer better solutions, both to ourselves and to everyone else. And we can do this. We can do this if we break this elitist approach. I think many people feel belittled by the liberal left elite. We need to break that hierarchy. We really need to get out of our own cocoons and our own little cultural ghettos, talk with more people, but also perhaps we need to diffuse a new, in my opinion, radical new humanism. It all boils down to identity politics. If we can tell people, yes, you might be this and that, but at the same time you can have many more multiple belongings. And this was done in the 1970s. It was done so successfully by mostly African-American women's movement, people like Audre Lorde. You know, they would write poems. And they would say, she would say, look at me, I'm black, I'm a woman, I'm lesbian, I'm a poet, I'm this, I'm that. And I'm many more things you might not see at first glance, but I'm all of them. So this is what we forgot. We have been reduced to single identities. I really think if we can revive the language of humanism, this is a kind of language that can travel east and west. It is a kind of language that can emphasize coexistence. Yes, we are different, but at the same time, I think public space is incredibly important, and it will become even more important to bring diversity into the public space. So bring more women, more minorities, diversify the rhetoric in the public space. To me, it all boils down, at the end of the day, to gaps. There are so many gaps, financial gaps, you know, economic gaps, social gaps, but also cognitive gaps. And we have to pay more attention to those gaps. Not many people do that. I do give talks in different, you know, international conferences, and sometimes you have people who are very good at technology. They come with great hopes. They say, we're making so much progress, human life is longer now, we do this, we do that, but they're not paying attention to the gaps. You know, cultural, economic, and cognitive gaps. If we cannot mend those gaps, if we cannot bridge those gaps, no matter how much progress you make in one part of the world, the misery of someone living elsewhere is going to affect our lives here, because we're all interconnected. And I thought we had learned this after 9/11. You know, we have learned that the unhappiness of someone living in Pakistan affects the life of someone living in Canada. So the only way forward is, to me, by reviving a new humanism, by paying more attention to the gaps, to the inequalities, and to remember that we're all of us in this together, not as categories of us versus them, but together.
Thank you. We have sorry for that. We have last round of the questions.
Yep. Thank you.
Or no comments or whatever you want.
Yeah, I'd like to take up several points that were mentioned. On the one hand, that self-criticism on the left that is necessary, and also the question of how the left or also the center can connect to the people. And it's an issue that has been mentioned several times, but we haven't talked about it explicitly, and it's the political correctness on the left. And I think that this is a very important issue that we really have to overcome in the future in order to kind of get to the future that we all envision, because the refusal on many parts of the left to address obvious problems in the name of political correctness, because the left doesn't want to offend anyone, is frankly stupid. Like, being offended is not a valid category in the discussions that we want to have, because our discussions have to be based on facts and on arguments. So if we cannot even raise the question of whether, for example, in many Muslim societies, women are not treated equally as men are, because we are afraid that Muslims might be offended by that, well then, sorry, I don't care if I offend someone. If that person thinks that that statement is not correct, then the person should come up with facts, with arguments, and try and convince me that this is not correct. If the person cannot find arguments to convince me, well, then my criticism is correct and has to be raised. And if the person is not disagreeing with the statement anyway, well, then the criticism is even more needed. So I think this not addressing obvious problems for the sake of not offending anyone is really something that we have to overcome. Ever more so because on the left it's pretty also like not really logical, because the left is very cautious not to offend certain groups. For example, refugees, or like the groups they kind of want to protect. But on the other hand, they do not hesitate to call right-wing parties fascists. So they immediately throw these words at the right-wing parties, and they do not care if the people who vote for these parties might feel offended. But I mean, in my country, in Austria, 47% voted for a supposedly fascist party. It has been called fascist several times in this conference, and I think this is very wrong to call them fascist. Also because it simply builds up walls that cannot be broken down. Because what does someone think who votes for the right-wing party if the left only calls him a fascist? That person thinks, well, okay, the left doesn't even want to try to understand what I think. They just call me fascist and that's it. So this makes a communication and negotiation of common issues in the society impossible. So my point is simply that we have to overcome this
and tackle our problems, populism, extremism, racism, and every enemy we have as European society. Thank you.
Mr. Shafak, Madam Shafak, and then you will have a last word. I promise.
You know, I do travel quite a bit, both in the Middle East and across Europe. And at the expense of generalization, I want to share with you something that I hear quite often. When you travel in Europe or in the US, you will come across many women who will tell you that, you know, thank God I wasn't born over there. And by over there, they mean the Middle East. Had I been born over there, I would have no rights. You know, I would be reduced to an object. And then when you go to the Middle East, when you go to Jordan, Syria, you can't travel these days, but in the past when I could, or Turkey, then I would hear many Muslim women say, you know, thank God I wasn't born over there. And by that they mean Europe, they mean the Western world. And when you ask them, they would say, well, because I would be reduced to a sexual, you know, identity and I would have no more value. And then when you question them, you know, but how many Jewish friends do you have? How many Christian friends do you have? How many actual, you know, women, American, Canadian, French women you've met? Usually the answer is nil. But they have an idea about the other. And I think this is where the greatest danger lies. On many sides of the Atlantic, we have an idea about the other, and we make very easily sweeping generalizations, forgetting the fact that these are not monolithic entities. There's no such thing as the West, there's no such thing as the East. We need to break this duality in the first place, you know? And when we talk about, of course, I totally agree, we should stop being offended, and freedom of expression should be a central value in that regard. But at the same time, we should be careful about hate speech, especially hate speech targeting the vulnerable, minorities, individuals. I come from a country that has forgotten this many times, so I think hate speech is also important. We have lots of issues to talk about. Definitely political correctness is not helping us, but political correctness is not one of our primary problems. Let's be critical of it, but it's not the main problem. I think we need to be more realistic. We need to understand that populism is on the rise, and populist politicians all throughout history, whenever they came to power, they benefited from power. This is what we need to worry about. Now, they are coming to power by using the means of democracy. They will change the perception of democracy. How are we going to deal with this? So, just as a conclusion, I would say history does not necessarily always go forward. We tend to think that tomorrow is more progressive than yesterday, not necessarily. Sometimes it draws circles, sometimes it goes backwards, sometimes nations make the same mistakes over and over again. So for us, I think it's incredibly important at this stage in life to break this rhetoric of nationalism, tribalism, isolationism, religious fundamentalism, and to revive a new language, a fresh, smart language that's based on empathy, that's based on a new humanism. And if we use our emotional intelligence, we can do this.
Thank you. You have about,
Yeah, 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Okay. Now, I would like others to have a chance to reply, because I'm here to ruin any harmony and so on. First, again, with all respect, you some wonderful thing, but you remember when you said in your previous intervention a little bit of how, when we are dealing with the enemies, we should move away of this total confrontation, us against them and so on. I agree up to a point. Would you say the same thing in 42 in Europe? Huh? Listen, Hitler, yes, but let's not go to the end. We should... No, there are enemies where the point is to totally destroy him.
Yeah, but I think you misunderstand me. I'm not saying we should not deal... Just the opposite. I'm saying we should deal with this in a smarter way. I am saying if you push them, if you say everyone who voted for Trump is a racist, we're going to lose these people forever.
No,
you're going to push these people further into the lap of the far right. And I have seen the elite in the UK make this mistake again and again.
I agree
so
here.
my answer is not to deal with the rise of populism, to deal with it in a smarter way, in a better way.
I agree with this, but nonetheless I claim, you see, you shifted quickly from Hitler to populism, which is obviously an ambiguous phenomenon. But I'm saying there are situations where there is the enemy and there is no debate. He should be ruined. You know what I mean? There are clear cases like that. I'm just saying a second thing. This humanism, it sounds nice, but my formula is a different one. I don't have time now within your 2 minutes to squeeze it in. I would say the only universality before divisions and so on is to say we have here our own struggle. In Arab countries, they have their own struggle. We have our own us against them. They have their own us against them. The only unity for me is the unity of a struggle. We should combine our struggles. That's the only base for universal humanism for me, that we connect our struggles. The last thing, this politically correct. You took a wonderful example, but would you agree, because I totally agree with you, I could even add another, when you said, or you also very nicely, how this... no, sorry, who said this? I'm confused. That these people who attack the other, but how many do they know of these others? Nil, no one. But you know what's my experience from the United States? That this goes also for many political anti-racists. They accuse me of, because I made often a bad taste joke of being anti-black and so on. Then I ask them, I have many black friends who incidentally enjoy these dirty jokes. How many black friends you have? None. I've encountered this with so many politically correct people. They want to keep very much apart from those whom they pretend to defend. And the last point, you lady third from the last one, for new generation humanism. You, yes. You know what's my problem? You embodied what I am afraid of. You know in what sense? You said just these general phrases, we, new generations, we should establish. Give me, as the Americans say, when you have a sandwich, where is the beef? So you spoke purely as a politician. We need a new solution, young generation should be involved in this. What you said, the most corrupted politician would totally agree with it. Give me one hint of what you, the ingenious young generation, would have done it differently. Can you give me one tiny idea?
Maybe we will get it in the declaration you have prepared.
Sorry?
Maybe we will get it in the declaration they have prepared for the last 2 days.
Yeah, okay.
So?
Yeah, my point was young people should participate, become part the old generation decide for us without us.
But they do participate. All racist movement, anti-immigrant, it's young people beating foreigners, much more than old people. Your generation is among the worst in attacking immigrants. You are already participating.
I originally thought that we will end up with something positive.
Why? Why? You are still a communist, even if you were not born. Why can't we once finish a debate with, sorry guys, we don't have a solution?
Can I say something?
Okay, sorry guys, we don't have a solution. That's the end of the show of the last today. Thank you very much for the participation.
That's for the EU officials.
They are now supposed to present it, as far as I remember from the program. Sasha, how is it with the declaration?
Can I just say something?
Oh, you have. Sorry, you have already said a lot. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
We have to finish. Sorry, we have to finish.
So what I'm going to say is that there's a big difference between politically incorrect and being incorrect. The problem with the people like yourselves that you say things saying, this is politically incorrect, but I will say it. But the problem is that they're incorrect. For example, when you say the enemy, we have an enemy. And I know you don't go in further details to explain who is the real enemy. But who's the enemy really? Is it Islam? Is it the Muslims?
Sorry guys, it's really
So
for the next 5 hours debate on which we don't have booked this room. I guess that the audience would stay here, but sorry.
I think we are doing
our
the right
time
thing.
is
We are
over.
debating, we are talking, and we enjoy, debating. I think it's much better than the last talk where we just,
Then ask the Goethe Institute if we can stay here, and then we can stay here.
Oh, I will stay with them, of course, if you had time.
Okay, Sasha, it's up to
I
you.
have a suggestion to make. You can take this outside. It's always a good solution if the discussion becomes rather physical. Okay. We're going to have a quick coffee break, and then we're going to continue with the manifesto of the students and an ongoing discussion on what we're taking out of this and what's going to be the consequence of all the 4 panels we've had here. Thank you very much.